Hello and welcome into a very exciting episode of Tailgating with the Boys. Today we will have a very special guest that I know Brody and I are very excited to have on. But before we get into this, a couple of things that happened since we were last together. Michigan, I know, we took on Illinois as we were recording on Sunday. Ended up losing that. We'll get into that in a second. Along with Kansas and Houston being a little bit closer than I think a lot of people thought yesterday on Monday, and then obviously Duke just continuing to beat the crap out of every single ACC team that they run across. I think it was another 30-plus point win at home against Wake. Cooper Flagg had a crazy game. Not much has changed, but a couple things that we're going to touch on quick. But Brody, how we feeling? And you excited for the week?
Yeah, man, it's a exciting week, final week of the regular season for college hoops. Obviously Duke continues to roll. That Houston-Kansas game was a lot closer than people expected.
Mm-hmm.
And then Michigan kind of feels like they're playing their worst basketball of the year. At
a very bad time.
Yes.
Yep.
Given Illinois did look really good. On Sunday. They did look really good. We know Illinois is a tournament team. They have been a premier tournament team for some time now. But Michigan's got to turn it around, or they're going to find themselves on a 5 line having to play a very tough 12 seed.
And, big time.
Yeah, and then going off that, Cooper Flagg he's probably the best freshman we've seen in a long time in college basketball. Probably since Zion. The difference, I think, is Cooper Flagg can actually lead Duke to the national championship. And Cooper Flagg's also on a worse, less talented team than Duke was at the time, than Zion's team at the time. But I thought it was awesome yesterday. I think he would stay if it wasn't for the money aspect. I think he would stay at Duke. I think he's having so much fun. He twirled his fingers, said run it back. He would love to stay. Even the Continental kid would love to stay too. He has some brothers coming up. For those of you who don't know, he has 3 younger brothers who are all already getting D1 type of looks. So, and then I know you mentioned to me before the Houston-Kansas game. It was the biggest underdogs Kansas has ever been going into the game, and for some time now. I don't know.
At least for a very long time. I think it was 5 years.
Which
is what it was. I think they were 9.5. I think is what it closed at, maybe something around there. But yeah, definitely. Kansas showed up. They obviously didn't get the win, but a 6-point loss, I believe, to one of the best teams in the country proves that they can still compete.
Which given Houston doesn't necessarily blow teams out of the water, and it never felt like the game got out of hand for Houston. It felt like it was one of those games you watch where Houston's going to win by less than 10 points, but at the same time, there's no shot they lose unless Kansas hits 5 threes in a row at the end of the game. LJ Crier's great. It was senior night for the Cougars. Saw Kelvin Sampson get a little bit emotional. Hunter Dickinson, it's going to be one of his last games. I'd like to see Kansas turn it around, but I don't know what they're going to do in the tournament. I feel like they have the potential to be the biggest wild card team in the tournament.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely a team that's going to get a lower seed than people expected. But I think one of those teams that you really would not want to see is probably a 7. I think is kind of where they're at right now. 6 or 7 range is where Kansas is sitting. So not a team that you want to see as a lower seed. Round of 32, Sweet 16. As one of those 2 or 3 seeds in the region. But going back to Michigan, I continue. I'm going to continue to think that Michigan's going to continue to drop. They have Maryland at home tomorrow, and then their last game of the year is at Michigan State. So 2 of the hard. I think those are the 2 top teams in the Big Ten. So that's a rough way to finish your season. But at the same time, they haven't had a dominating win. Like, they haven't had a game that wasn't close or that they lost since mid-January when they had Washington come to town. They beat them by almost 20. But after that, a 3-point loss at Minnesota, a 4-point win against Northwestern, lost by almost 30 at Purdue. beat Penn State by 4, beat Rutgers by 3, beat Oregon by 4, Indiana by 3, Purdue by 2 at home. The Ohio State game, obviously close. We talked about that. Bruce Thornton airballed the layup at the end.
I
Um,
yeah, I said this Sunday they're like
yeah,
14-0 in one score game.
it's rough. It's rough. And then lose to Michigan or Michigan State. And then we kind of talked about, okay, you have Nebraska and Rutgers. They really need to get back on track with those two games. Really struggled to score against Nebraska. Only scored 49 points. Granted, they kept Nebraska to 46, so ended up winning. And then same with Rutgers, hitting that buzzer beater 3 at the end was crucial for them. But they are playing some really bad basketball at the worst time possible. And against obviously they're good Big Ten teams. You know, Purdue's good, Penn State's good, Maryland's good. That's clear. Rutgers is not great. They have not been playing great basketball down the stretch. Same with Nebraska. So those are games that like you really shouldn't be winning by single digit margins. So I'm a little bit nervous for Michigan. I know we were very high on them all year, kind of as running 2 7-footers who consistently score and can score at all levels, shoot the ball from deep, but also can score inside, and that's hard to beat. But if they continue to play it the way they're at, I wouldn't be shocked if they're a first round bounce.
Yeah, it's interesting because it seems as if teams have kind of figured Michigan out a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's basically come down to make someone else beat you besides Danny Wolf. And then at the same time, their guards can't handle the basketball, so that's kind of killing them too. They're expecting Danny Wolf to do a little too much.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, he's a very skilled basketball player, but then again, he is just a kid who is 7 feet tall and he's still coming into his own body. He's not going to be able to do that 2 to 3 times a week. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it's it's getting nerve wracking seeing them because they do have a lot of talent, but if their guards don't learn to control the ball, they're going to be in trouble.
Big time, big time. Yeah, I think
But
those are.
yeah,
That's definitely a team that I was very high. I mean, we were both very high on. Probably even 2 weeks ago, we were like, okay, this is a team that can probably make a run. Now I don't know. I mean, depending on matchups, obviously, but I wouldn't be shocked if they get bounced first round, and definitely not a team that I feel confident getting to the Sweet 16 anymore.
yeah, yeah, definitely. Like I said this on Sunday. Right now, they're ceiling at the Sweet 16. And that's still stretching after watching them against Illinois.
Mm-hmm.
But something kind of important I wanted to acknowledge a little bit. It's probably bubble night of the year. Um, there's from the last four in to the last four at large. Out of those 16 teams, I believe like 11 of them or something stupid is playing tonight. Make or break games for some of these teams. I mean, Ohio State, Nebraska, you could argue that's an elimination game. You could very well make that
Mm-hmm.
argument. SMU plays at Syracuse. That can completely knock SMU out. I know North Carolina plays. They go on the road to Virginia Tech. Indiana goes out to Oregon. Indiana could almost clinch a spot with a win out at
Mm-hmm.
Oregon. It's just a lot to watch, and all these teams are on the road. That's something huge. I mean, 9 out of 11 of them are on the road. So
All the teams we need to lose are
all
on the
these,
road,
yes, all
which is
these
great.
teams we need to lose are on the road. It would be huge. I mean, Indiana losing tonight would be a big one. Going ahead and getting SMU out of the way would be huge. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I don't really know who we're rooting for in Nebraska, Ohio State. Maybe Ohio State just to even up their records. I don't.
As Buckeyes, I feel like we got
Yeah.
to go with Ohio State because both those teams are bubble teams, and like you said, I think the loser of that probably gets bounced. Um, and then obviously the Georgia South Carolina game, unfortunately, that's already at halftime, and Georgia's up 11. But big night for Xavier. Hopefully, we can get on the right track. Um, but like I said, we have a very special guest joining us today. Somebody who's very well known within the Xavier community. Big Xavier media guy. Kind of has his part in all sorts of different Xavier athletics. And also the co-host of the Sean Miller podcast. But without further ado, Paul, thanks for coming on. We're glad to have you.
What's going on, fellas? How are you today?
Doing great. Doing great.
Really?
Great to be here. Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, doing great,
Yeah.
especially after that win against Creighton on Saturday. Doing great. Big bubble action tonight. How are you doing tonight?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just getting ready to watch all these games. I mean, you look at how this whole season's gone, and I think a lot of times as college basketball fans, we get lost in, the bubble one night to the next and how much each game means to the bubble and everything else. When you play a whole season, sometimes you might get too lost in one game or another. But really, when you look at some of these games tonight and tomorrow, they do have some big impacts on bubble teams playing each other and trying to save your season and everything else. And that's certainly what some of these teams, especially, tonight, Nebraska, Ohio State, some of these games that are going to happen.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, we were
awesome.
just talking about that one. As Buckeye fans, we're kind of pulling for Ohio State, but loser of that almost seems like they might drop out of the first four out or first
I,
four in. I mean,
Yeah, I was going through it earlier. I would say that if you're a Xavier fan, if you're a fan of any bubble team besides one of those teams, I would probably lean Ohio State there just because, um, or actually, sorry, I would actually lean Nebraska there than I would Ohio State, only because I think a home loss might knock Ohio State off of it. I know you guys said you're Ohio State fans, but just playing it as a bubble observer, I would think that that loss would probably do a little more damage to Ohio State just because it's at home. But really, it's kind of a toss up. You could see an argument both ways.
yeah, definitely.
I definitely think the big one to keep an eye on is Arkansas at Vanderbilt. I think an Arkansas win would fully propel them in, just based off how some teams have them. Along with an Arkansas loss there, kind of knocks them to the bottom of that first four out. I would say.
Yeah, I think Vanderbilt's safely in
Yeah.
at this point, and I'm fine with where we are with Vanderbilt right now. I would much rather we put a team like Vanderbilt in that's proven they can win games and is playing at a high level than some of these teams that are losing games like a Wake Forest and just maybe backing their way into the tournament. But yeah, I think Arkansas, especially when you look at what happened with Arkansas over the weekend at South Carolina. I know Georgia and South Carolina are playing right now. I don't know what the score is. I turned that off a minute ago, but I think looking at what Arkansas has done lately, like I do think in general we kind of get lost a little bit in the conference record. I've seen a lot of people over the last few days of Oklahoma's 4-13 or whatever, 4-11 in the SEC, or it's the same kind of argument with Arkansas where not a great conference record, but they do have some wins at least on their resume. And I think in general you just have to look at who they've beaten. The committee's not looking at the conference record. They're not looking to see just because they beat some teams in conference or out of conference, when they beat them necessarily. So I do think, though, that the way Arkansas is playing, a win like this tonight, you're exactly right. A win like this tonight over Vanderbilt, and that's a lot of momentum for them when they need it after that
Yeah,
game this weekend where they start 4 for 34 from the field.
yeah, that game was rough. And I
Yeah.
agree. I think Vandy's kind of hitting their stride at a perfect time. I feel like they're probably playing some of their best basketball they have all year over the last 2 weeks or 3 weeks or so.
Oh yeah,
So yeah,
absolutely.
yeah,
Well, Paul, we have some questions that we wanted to dive into. We're gonna kind of start out with not some more personal questions, because whenever people listen to you talk, it's just like strictly basketball. No one like asks really how you're doing or anything. But one of the bigger things that started more so recently is the Sean Miller pod. So I guess for me and Carter, we're kind of curious how that kind of like came about, whose like idea that was, and then what's it kind of like working that closely with like Sean Miller and like getting to have a coach on a podcast like that. Like you don't see that anywhere else in the country. I think that's something awesome.
Yeah, it's certainly unique. It's something that you don't see much anywhere, if anywhere else. I know some coaches have their weekly radio shows and things like that, but to give Sean an opportunity to bring some of his other former coaches on that he's coached with, former players on, people that he's worked with over his decades in college basketball is certainly something unique. And, I was approached with this in the summer of 2023 by Anthony Breen, who's a 2014 Xavier graduate. He's the founder of Synergistic, which is a media marketing agency as well. And he wanted to start a sports arm of that. And so he came to me, he came to Adam Baum, and he said, "Hey, can you guys essentially put together this podcast with Sean and combine your audiences with the head coach and host this show and give people an opportunity to hear from Sean, not just in the X's and O's. And I think that's something that we focus on a lot is what does Sean think off the court, or maybe not so much off the court necessarily as we don't get lost in the weeds of the day-to-day of what's happening in the season, because that's not our job. That's the job of his weekly radio show. And we don't want to overstep that. We don't want to, it, maybe even overstep. I mean, we just, they already cover it, right? If you're listening to the radio show and then we start to talk about the same questions, then people have already heard it. It's not as interesting to people. Whereas if we bring on Bob Stack, who was one of the reasons that Xavier Basketball is what it is right now, let's hear for an hour from Bob about what it was like to build this program. Or Stanley Johnson. And I was just looking at the G League graphic last night of Stanley Johnson and Christian Coloco and Quincy Oliveri. The three of the starting five for the South Bay Lakers are all Sean Miller products. And, two of those guys have been on our show, but just to be able to talk to some of those guys about, I think Stanley Johnson in school, you would have thought he would have had a ton more success in the NBA than he's had. And hearing him tell that story of, why he is where he is and some of the things he wished he would have known and some of the things, pieces of advice that he shared, it's so valuable for future players, right? High school recruits, for other players maybe in the transfer portal that are thinking about coming to Xavier to say, what am I getting when I go to play for Sean Miller? What am I signing up for? Here's what I can expect. And that's our goal, is to be able to show people, not just recruits, but fans, other people, whoever might care about this program, and just high school coaches as well. I think we have a huge subscriber base of high school coaches because they enjoy listening to that leadership style, the coaching experience, and everything else. So it's been a very fun 2 years. I think this year it's been much different than it was last year, where we haven't recorded as many shows in the season. I think anybody that looks at this team could tell you that the season hasn't gone exactly as the coaching staff would have hoped that this season it would have gone like. And because of that, through January, December and January, we really wanted to make sure that we weren't distracting Sean with consistently asking him to do podcasts over and over every week. It was, hey, we're still around. We're still doing the All In docu-series every week. We're still there at practice, or every couple of weeks, but we're still there at practice every day. We're still filming everything. We're still creating content around the team. And I think that avenue is why we were able to say, hey, look, Sean, we'll check back in with you when we know you have time and we're not doing anything that's creating any sort of a distraction. And to be clear, whenever Sean does a show, he comes in, we have everything set up, he records, he leaves. We're the ones clipping things, we're the one editing things. If it's a 36-minute show, his time commitment to us is 40 minutes. 2 minutes to come in, sit down, 2 minutes to leave. Maybe he talks to us for a little bit afterwards if he has some time. But it's not as if the podcast is a huge drain on his time and his resources or anything like that. And I think that's why he really enjoys doing it, because it allows him to almost have basketball therapy in a way.
Kind of mellow out in a way too. Kind of just like lay everything out there instead of just having to be a coach the whole time, it feels like.
Yeah, exactly. And you think back to last year, right? Xavier has their first losing season in however long, 20, almost 30 years. And to be able to do a show, we did do a show pretty much every week last season with Sean, and it was interesting week after week having, former players or people around the program, whoever it was, to have them on and to talk about those stories off the court or reminisce on some of those memories, and to realize that, things might not be going so well right now, but there were good times. There is a bigger picture here, and let's, put everything into perspective and remember that we still can enjoy things, even though in the minutia, in the moment, it might not seem like everything's going great. So I think all of that together, Sean has enjoyed doing the show, and we hope that we're going to still put out some great content in the future.
Yeah,
No, that's awesome, and I know we both listen to it a lot and enjoy it. So, thank you guys for putting that on, and it's awesome to listen to. But kind of going off that, and I talked about it a little bit when you first came on, all the stuff you do for Xavier Athletics and everything else. How did you kind of get to where you are now with the podcast and also all the media stuff that you do for the school as well?
Yeah, I started doing it when I was a student. I mean, I was a couple of weeks into my freshman year, and I said that I want to work for the athletic department. I want to be able to, pursue a career in whether it's broadcasting or content creation, whatever it is. At the time, it was I was going to be a play-by-play broadcaster, and there was nothing that was going to stop me. And that dream has since evolved. I think play by play is still something I would like to continue doing. I don't want to totally put that in the rear view. I don't want to say that that's something I've completely given up on. But at the time, I was going to be a Major League Baseball broadcaster, and there was no other option for me. I mean, that was exactly what I was going to do. It's what I'd always wanted to do. But I did baseball, every summer in college. And then after college, COVID hit in the summer of 2020 when I was going to get my first professional job. And so that pushed it the minor league season until 2021. But I did the one season in baseball at the professional level. I was in Double A for the Orioles, their Double A team, and I just realized that I wanted to do more instead of just baseball. And I think the commitment to baseball is it's so taxing, just because you're doing, if you get to the major leagues, 162 games a year
Yeah,
plus, let's call it 10 or 15 spring training games at least, if not more. And then hopefully your team's playing in the postseason and you're committed to those. So you're talking about close to 200 baseball games a year where you're not around, you're traveling a lot. Every day is spent at the ballpark. I love baseball. I love it, but I just didn't want it to completely envelop everything about what I was doing through the summer and everything else. And so because of that, I leaned more into college basketball, and to doing some other things as well. Got back to Cincinnati after working that summer out in Maryland. And, my family moved here, graduated from Xavier in 19. My family moved here a little bit later. And, originally from the DC area, but loved being here in Cincinnati. Met my wife at Xavier, still live here, love being around Cincinnati. And because of that, I think too, like living in the Midwest, man, there's so much to do here as far as sports go. You think of all the Big Ten, ACC, or ACC at Louisville, but SEC as well, right down the road at Kentucky. Big East here with Xavier and Butler. I mean, this is a hotbed for college athletics and opportunities if I do want to continue doing play-by-play as well. So because of that, all of the things that I did at Xavier led me to these opportunities, and I'm really thankful for it.
Yeah, that's awesome. I know we've talked about it before. The Midwest is from the ground up with sports. I mean, high school sports are great in Ohio. Ohio is a top football state for all sports. I mean, high school, college, and pros in this area alone kind of run the country. You look at the college football this past year, the top teams in every division came from the Midwest or the North, which I thought was really cool. But going off what you said, is there like a moment when you were like a kid that you knew you wanted to be like a play-by-play guy, a broadcaster? Like, do you remember that moment where you're like, man, I really enjoy this?
I don't know if there was one single moment, but I think it was just, learning how to read from the sports section of the newspaper every single morning with breakfast. It was, watching Sports Center. It was being outside and playing sports every single day. I mean, it was just every single thing that I did throughout my entire life was in some way related to sports, right? Even, a lot of the volunteering that I did growing up, my uncle has Down syndrome. A lot of the volunteering I did growing up was around the Special Olympics. I mean, I really felt like everything that I did in some way, shape, or form tied back in. And so I don't know if there was one moment where it really clicked that I said, oh, I want to do baseball on TV. I just remember that was gradually where I gravitated to. And as I got older and as I did that and got more experienced with it, I love still doing baseball at Xavier because it scratches that itch for me, right? I get to do maybe 20 games of Xavier baseball, however many home games they have. Some years they play more when it's warmer. Some years, they're like this year, they're on the road for a while. They always start on the road till the middle to end of March. But that's enough for me. Like doing that baseball, especially college baseball now, and how much that sport has ballooned over the last few years with how much it's grown. It's been fun to see. I think the pitch clock has made a huge difference in college baseball, and because of that, I look back on some of my early experiences in sports and thinking, what do I want to do? Well, I want to be in broadcasting, and now being able to fulfill that through all of this, it's fun. But to answer your question straight up, I don't have a moment where, as a 8-year-old, we took a field trip and I went to the, press box at Nationals Park when I was 10 and I sat in the booth and put a headset on and said, I'm going to do this. Like, I don't point back to one of those moments, more so just everything that I did wrapping up my personality into a game or an event or a sporting event in some way.
Everything just led to this moment where
Yeah.
it wrapped around in sports. Definitely.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And I know you talked about being in the Orioles organization and obviously everything that you do with Xavier and Sean Miller podcast. Who are kind of some of those very influential people that you've had in your career to help you kind of get to where you are now?
Yeah, I mean, specifically at Xavier, there's a lot of people I could go down from the broadcasting side. Mike Schmaltz is the first person that comes to mind because he's somebody that I've broadcasted almost every Xavier event with over the last 9 years. But I mean, outside of that, it's almost like I don't want to name one person in particular because there's been so many from a broadcasting perspective of guys that I met while I was in school. And, I've shared this story a lot, but I really took and made a priority the fact that Xavier was a Fox Sports partner. And I made sure to meet almost every play-by-play broadcaster that came in to do basketball games while I was a student. And because of that, I've maintained relationships because a lot of those same guys are still doing games to this day, 6 years later. I mean, Brandon Gaudin, who just did the Xavier game the other day against Creighton over the weekend. I mean, he and I were texting back and forth in the week leading up to the game, that he was going to be at the game, he was going to do the game, and then seeing him there and catching up with him on the court before he put the headset on. All of those little things that go back to my time as a student, just being diligent, reading the game notes, knowing that so-and-so was going to call the game and being able to keep up with them. It made a huge difference in my career. Joe Davis was somebody who now calls the World Series. He was doing college basketball 9 years ago when I was getting started. I didn't even know what college summer baseball leagues were. Obviously knew what the Cape Cod League was, but as a freshman in college, I wasn't playing baseball at that time. I was, on the club team, but I wasn't playing varsity baseball to the point where, I needed to go spend a summer somewhere. And so all I knew about was the Cape Cod League. I didn't know that college baseball summer leagues existed anywhere else. And he told me, Paul, you need to go find a summer job. And I was right up the road in Hamilton. That led to the next summer in independent ball, to the next summer that I was able to do the Orioles jobs or the Bay Sox job. But yeah, I think there have been a lot of people that have had a lot of different areas of impact on my career. But at Xavier, guys like Mike Schmaltz, Brendan Bergen, Patrick Dillon, Greg Lotzenheiser, Haley Schletker, all the people in the communications office over there that continue to give me opportunities. I could go down the list of people over there. And then, of course, now, Anthony and working with Adam and Josh, our video producer, Gabe, everybody. It's been fun.
Yeah, that's great. I was I was at the UConn game. That's the last game I got to go to at home, and a lot of people who don't really follow Xavier basketball as far as like Instagram, Twitter, know you as like the media guy that comes out between timeouts and halftime and does announcements and stuff. How do you get yourself psyched up to go out there, and how does it feel like when you're out there, like being in front of 8 to 10,000 people, if it's a sold out arena or low maintenance arena? How does it feel to be out there in front of that many people putting on a show for them?
I'll tell you what, it is an adrenaline rush, and it's something that's so unique because you can't practice it. Right, like when I was hired to do that job, I started to do it the summer or the winter after I graduated. So the winter of the season that ended in COVID, where there was no tournament, that was the first season that I had done that on court MC job, and I just filled in. I wasn't doing it full time like I was doing it. Not to say that that's my full time job. I just mean that I do every game now. At that point, I was just doing. I think I did maybe 5-6 games that year. Um, but my point with that is just that looking at the job and what I was signing up for, I remember trying out for that in an empty arena and talking into the microphone. There was a little bit of a lag up there, right? Which you always have to be careful of because you don't have anything in your ear when you're doing that job. So if you're not used to it, then you kind of sound like you're drunk if you're just slurring your words because you hear yourself on this maybe half a second echo. That takes a little getting used to make sure that you're not talking like really really slow, like that, the cadence of it. But the other part of it too, looking at the people, I really don't get nervous because, or at least not anymore, and I know that's easy to say, but it's because I have that camera in front of me. So when I see the camera in front of me and I see that little red light go on and I have my contestant next to me for whether it's the half court shot or whatever it is, it's like, to me, I'm just standing there talking as if I'm interviewing somebody on a broadcast, right? I know that's easy for me to say, and somebody else would not probably feel this way, but I don't see the people, right? I don't, I, it's like I completely block everything out. And that's why sometimes I like doing some of those hits without the camera in front of me because it does allow me to look around and interact maybe more personally with people that I can see in the first few rows and kind of point out or wave to, whatever. Um, but there are definitely times where, I will go up. Let's say I have something at the under 16 timeout, and then I don't have something again until the under 8 or the under 4, right? And I know that I have a 10-minute game break in between there where I can walk around or see people or whatever. I will walk up to the top of the arena sometimes, or I will walk around the concourse, or I'll stand in the Joseph Club or whatever, because I love to give myself, one, a different viewing perspective of the game, but two, I really enjoy reminding myself how many people are there, what it's like, and looking around. Because when you're on the court and you look up, yeah, there's 10,000 people there, but it doesn't feel like 10,000 people when I'm standing there just because I'm trying to think of so many different things. It's not until I go up to the top row and I look at everybody and I go, man, there are a lot of people in this building that you got to talk to in about 5 minutes. And those are the really cool moments for me. That's where I really love doing that job, and I have a ton of fun with it.
Yeah, it would definitely take me some getting used to be
Yeah,
out there in front of that many people. Definitely.
yeah,
I'm not much for, like, I can get up in front of people and talk, present just fine, but the moment, 10,000, that's a lot of people. A lot of people.
it's all about projection. It's
Yeah.
I'm telling you, fellas, half the job is just projecting well into the microphone.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, going off that too, I just a quick little thing. When did you realize you could get one of those foam balls way up into the 200 sections? I know I'm always shocked when you can get it almost up to the top concourse. It's kind of fun to watch.
Well, I'll tell you, I've been trying all year to get it actually all the way to the top because the managers film the game from the top row over on the opposite from the team bench. And I've told them all year I've been trying to get one up to them, and I just can't get it over that concrete barrier at the top. It's like another 15 feet that I just can't reach. But no, I played baseball my whole life. I pitched. Sometimes it does. I do kind of get a kick out of it. Like I would actually love, and I'm sure Billy would never let his guys go out there and throw their arms out doing that with a little foam ball because they'd probably need Tommy John surgery. But I might need Tommy John surgery if we're being honest with you fellas. I just power through it. But looking at like I would love to see a baseball player go out there and actually be able to throw a ball like that because I played baseball my whole life. It was the sport that I was the best at. I pitched. And I pitched until my freshman year of college, played club baseball for a semester, and then I just didn't have time for it the rest of college. But yeah, I enjoy it. It's fun. Like, and the other thing too is so many of the promotions that we do are down on the court or they're based in the 100 sections or, I have to be mobile running around to get to somebody based on wherever our assigned fan of the game is or whatever. That doing that, as kind of funny as this sounds, doing that is what I feel like can involve the upper bowl in something fun from what I can do down on the court. So that's why I can't get the T-shirts up there, but I do always try to make sure I can get 6 or 8 of those Joseph Auto Group balls up there, because in that way I can make sure that I'm effectively talking to the people up there in the 200s.
Yeah, I always like it. I'm always shocked too when you
It's
get
fun,
them
fellas.
pretty far up there.
Yeah.
Yeah, whenever you stand up, people are like, they're never gonna throw it up here, and all of a sudden, ball comes flying. What the heck?
It is always funny when I get a kick out of it when sometimes I'll throw it. So like sometimes I'll see somebody stand up when they know it's coming, and I'll try and see if I can get it right to that person. But then other times I'll throw it into a group that maybe is kind of like half paying attention, and then you can see them all kind of light up as the ball's getting up close, going, "Whoa, where'd that one come from?"
Yeah, that's great. Rolling off that, I asked you this question Saturday night, but kind of short and sweet for the people, since the people that didn't get listened to the spaces. What after Saturday? What's your ceiling for this team, and how far do you think they can make a run?
Well, look, I tweeted this yesterday. If you just sort the data over the last month, Xavier's the 11th best team in the country since February 10th, and I know there's some nuance to that. You don't want to get totally lost in that statistic, but there's something to be said for how well Xavier is playing right now. And what I mean by that is, if you think back to 2017, Xavier made the Sweet 16, or made the Elite 8 rather, as an 11 seed. Quite frankly, if I'm Xavier right now, I'm not speaking for the team. I'm just speaking as somebody that covers the sport. But if I was Xavier right now, I would rather be an 11 seed than an 8 or 9 seed, because just looking at the teams that are projected to be on that 6 line, I think Xavier stacks up pretty well with a bunch of them. And then all you got to do is maybe go pick off the 3 seed to get to the Sweet 16. If you're an 8 seed or a 9 seed, you got a tough game in that 8-9 game. Then you got to go play Houston or Auburn you look at the 1 line this year, you have a 75% chance to get matched up with a historically good team. And then, oh, by the way, that 4th team is historically good as well. They're just maybe not quite as good as the top tier of Houston, Duke, and Auburn. But you have 3 SEC teams competing for that 4th number 1 seed, that if you're an 8-9 seed, good luck. If any 1 seed gets bounced before the Sweet 16, I would be shocked, just because of how good these teams are. Duke, Auburn, Houston, and then whoever we want to pick for that 4th number 1 seed, whether it's Tennessee or whoever else, Florida. But overall, Alabama, maybe. I think Tennessee probably would have that edge at this point. But to get back to the Xavier perspective, first they got to make the tournament. The business is not done yet. This team is not in the tournament right now. They are very close to being in the tournament, but they have to take care of business this week. They have to beat Butler tomorrow night. They have to beat Providence on Saturday. I don't want to get too lost in what happens at Madison Square Garden, as if to say this. A lot of times you might put too much emphasis on what happens in the conference tournaments. The committee has shown us year after year that they don't value conference tournaments for resumes as much as a lot of people think they do. The best example for that was Texas A&M a few years ago, where they won 3 games, went to the SEC final. We thought they might avoid Dayton, right? We thought Texas A&M had done enough work in the SEC tournament to play themselves out of Dayton, maybe into the last 4 buys, as potentially even a 10 seed, at least a high 11 seed. They missed the tournament completely, right? And then Xavier went and beat them in the NIT final. I believe that was the same year. Went and beat them in the NIT final. So if you're Xavier, you still have to get in. But if they get in, you feel pretty good about being able to beat a team in Dayton. And then from there, as it is with any team, it becomes a matchup game. They are playing like a team right now that could win 2 games in the NCAA tournament. And then from there, who knows what happens. But when you think about the tournament, Sean Miller has said this before, you think about getting to the Sweet 16 and getting to the Final Four and then winning the national championship. It's like each one of those pods are their own little thing. Nobody remembers the team that won the 1 game and then lost in the round of 32. Or how often do we think about teams that made the Elite 8? When you think of the NCAA tournament, you think to yourself, oh, they made the Sweet 16, or oh, they made the Final Four. Elite Eights sometimes get lost in the busyness of everything else. The teams that just got to the second weekend, we think they're a second weekend team. Xavier is playing right now as a second weekend team. The problem is they dug themselves in a hole in November and December. They're really close to digging themselves out of it. They're really, really close. And they're playing like one of the best teams in the country right now. I expect them, and I have said this since they beat Marquette on the road in January, I expect them to make the NCAA tournament. I think they will. I think they're a good enough team to win at Butler tomorrow, to win against Providence on Saturday, and then potentially to win in that 4-5 game next Thursday at Madison Square Garden, in which case I'd be feeling great about Xavier making the tournament, barring, a bunch of bid stealers, which you can never rule out.
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
I agree. I mean, no, I would, with the exception of maybe Auburn, Duke, and Houston, I would probably match us up with anyone in the country right now based off how we've been playing. That's confidence wise, and I feel like our experience has finally kicked in. It feels like these older guys like Freemantle, Conwell, McKnight, like it feels like these guys finally, you can see they want it, and they're going out and they're trying to get it. It's nice to see it finally come together.
Yep.
Yeah, staying Big East, but kind of switching gears a little bit. We've been talking about it over the last couple weeks, but St. John's is playing incredible basketball right now, and a lot of the things that I've been seeing, and I know some things have changed at the beginning of this week, but a lot of people still have them kind of as a 3 seed and some as a 4 seed. Do you think they're kind of still getting underrated a little bit in that sense?
I do from that perspective. Now, the thing I will say about St. John's is they have lost, 3 Big East games by a combined 7 points, I believe is the stat. I don't have it in front of me, but I think that's the stat I saw earlier today. This is a team in my mind, and I know a lot of people disagree with me on this because they don't shoot the ball very well. I'm not sure that matters for this St. John's team. The thing I get worried about is how tight the NCAA tournament whistle is. Officials call the NCAA tournament much tighter than they do in the regular season. So I do get a little concerned with St. John's style of defense and how hectic and how much havoc they create on the defensive end, that they could potentially run into some trouble in March if guys get into foul trouble. But if they're able to limit foul trouble, the way they defend is so tenacious and it's so hard to score against. I think this is a team that could, and to me, I think I will probably pick them to make the Final Four. Obviously going to have to see the bracket and where they match up, but I think this is a team that can make the Final Four. They are that good. They are so close to an undefeated season. They are really close. Now, they've also been close to losing a few games that they've had to pull out. Think about the Xavier game. Do you think about some of these games that have been bad? Even Seton Hall over the weekend, the game they won to win the Big East title, that game, if you just look at the final score, it was a 10-point win. If you actually watch the game, it was a battle with Seton Hall most of the way. So from that perspective, yeah, maybe there are some concerns to be had, which is why a 3 seed sounds fair. But I mean, a 3 seed, you're still one of the top 12 teams in the country. I think they're a top 10 team. I would not hesitate to put them on the 2 line. I think they've deserved it. But, if they end up a 3 seed, there's no shame in that.
No, yeah, definitely.
Me and Carter are each very high on the St. John's team. I've even had them as high as a 1 because I don't feel like some of these SEC teams are very consistent and can win on a neutral site like Seton Hall can. But kind of an overall question is, I'm going to start with what makes college basketball so great. We're seeing a lot of these other sports kind of change. Like college football added the playoff. Hockey just did the 4 nations. The NBA is the worst product in all sports right now. What has college basketball as arguably the best product right now that doesn't need a change?
I would say there's so much to like about college basketball because, especially in the month of March, you have teams playing for their entire seasons. I mean, right now, as we speak, there are conference tournaments happening all over the country that include teams playing for their lives in the postseason. You have moments from players that will etch themselves into sports history because of shots that they make. You think of St. Peter's, you think of Oakland last year and Jack Golke, you think of Steph Curry, who's the greatest shooter in the history of this sport. Where did he start? With a upset win over Georgetown in the NCAA tournament all the way back when he was wearing a Davidson jersey. So many moments that you can think of, and that's why college basketball, to me, I would say, and I've thought about this a lot this year, I think people are starting to get frustrated with NIL and the transfer portal from a fan perspective of trying to follow their favorite team. And I understand that. There's a lot of turnover. There are a lot of fans that just don't feel like they have the bandwidth to follow all of the change and complete roster overhauls year after year after year. And I understand that. But from a pure product perspective, from a just turning on a game night in and night out, whether it's the SEC or the Big 12 or the Big East or the Big 10, whatever, all the way down the list, even in the mid-major conferences where you have guys that have started at a high major level and then transferred down, they're not afraid to compete in front of a huge crowd or compete against the high majors because they've done it before. That's where I think the parity in this sport is so great, and you're seeing a better product because of it. It's just harder to follow as a fan, and I think the sport has gotten better. I understand people that would say it's frustrating to follow, but I still think, players have earned the right and deserve the right to get paid for what they're doing. And now you're starting to see college basketball evolve into a sport with really, really talented high-level games night in and night out every time you turn on the TV. It's been so much fun this season, and I'm very excited to see what kind of upsets we see over the next few weeks, because like we've seen in years past, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, you just took the 1 seed and you just moved them over. You took a 2 seed in your region, you just moved them over. You didn't even think twice. Missouri losing to Norfolk State was crazy, right?
Yeah.
And now, all right, 2 seed loses to a 15. We've seen a 1 seed lose to a 16 twice. It happens because of the parity in the sport. And I think that's what makes it so great. It's, as John Rothstein would always say, expect the unexpected. And it's so much fun this time of the year.
Yeah, it is. It is amazing. I love March.
Yep.
Definitely by far my favorite sporting month of the year. But going off a little bit, we kind of do these questions for everybody we bring on at the end of the episode, more Xavier-based questions. But the first one is, can you get a starting 5 of Xavier players from when you so from 2019 on? Just solely based off that. If you need a 6th man, that's fine too. But what would your starting 5 be from Xavier players since 2019?
So the season ending 2020 on. Okay, so Najee Marshall's got to be in there. I would take Tyreek Jones in there. I think both of those guys are really great additions. I loved both of them. Colby Jones is in there. Man, I'm thinking of that Jack Nungy, big that can shoot, paired. But do I need? Maybe I
Bring
put.
Nungy off your bench.
Yeah, maybe. I think I might start Nungy and bring Tyreek off the bench. Put Colby. So I've given you 3 names, right?
Yeah, Tyreek, Colby.
Okay.
Tyreek off the bench, Nunji, Colby, and Najee.
Okay, so we'll put Quincy at the 2 to give you some shooting. We'll put point guard wise, let's go with Sule. I loved his ability to get to the line, shoot free throws at a high level. And then maybe a Dalen makes sense, but Fremantle, how do you leave Fremantle out of that lineup?
It's a tough question.
I mean, yeah, because you have Nungy as the big, but you could play big to big going Nungy to Fremantle or vice versa. Man.
You have Colby and you have a really large lineup with Najee.
Yeah. Man, I don't know what I would do for that last spot. Because I'm just really going through like best players almost. It's like I'm not really
Mhm.
building a great line. Like that lineup doesn't make a ton of sense when you actually put it out there on the court.
Pretty big
Uh,
lineup.
that's a huge lineup. Uh, yeah, I don't know. That's a great question. I'd have to think a little more about that and yeah, fire off. Because where does Fremantle fit in with his scoring? I would have to have him somewhere.
Yeah, right. And he probably wouldn't be able to play much of the three, so it'd
I
have to be
mean,
four or five.
maybe you take Najee off for as great as he's been in the NBA. Maybe you take Najee off and put Fremantle in there. Maybe I would do
Yeah,
that.
Yeah,
That
I
sounds
like so
that sounds crazy, but
Sule, Quincy, Colby, Fremantle, Nunji, and Tyreek off the bench.
here's the thing. I'm going to get off of this and I'm going to immediately say, "Oh my gosh, I forgot somebody," without looking at all the rosters in front of me, and I'm just yeah. But off the top of my head, that's what I would say.
yeah.
I like it. I like it.
Everyone's had a different response.
Yeah,
It's definitely how
Mhm.
you want to build your lineup. But
yeah.
our last question, you can keep this as PG as you want. Um, outside of sports, what was your favorite memory as Xavier? Rather it's a party, a get together, like a senior bar crawl that you look back and you're like, if I had to relive one day outside of sports, what would that day be in college for you?
Oh man, so many things that I just immediately went to were all sports related.
That's okay too.
The greatest week of my life was the 2018 uh, trip to New York for the Big East tournament,
Okay.
without a doubt.
Yeah, that'd be hard. That's hard to beat.
That would be very hard
I
to beat. I
mean,
can imagine.
I'm trying to think of like one specific day, like because that's not a week. I mean, that's not a day. That's a week. Is there one thing that sticks out that's not? This is almost sad that at everything sports related. I mean, I did meet my wife on a retreat. I guess I could say that
That's
we
proud.
led
That's
approach
proud.
together. I could say that was pretty good. That one worked
That's
out pretty well.
yeah, that's probably a good one. That's probably a
That's
good one.
probably a good one.
Yeah.
But yeah, we led approach together. That's pretty good, man. You guys just asked me two really good questions that I'm going to be thinking about for a while. Because I'm definitely you're putting me on the spot, and I haven't given you great answers, and I feel bad.
No, I like the starting five. I thought that was a great one.
Yeah.
You're the second person that we've had on that has had Tyreek. Tyreek's
Dude, it's
not
Tyreek
been a
Jones.
favorite.
You give me Tyreek Jones day in and day out, any day of the week. I loved how he played. I wish there were more Tyreek Joneses because
I
he was so good.
I cannot agree more. When I committed to Xavier in what was that? Probably late 2018, early 2019. Yeah.
Yeah.
The first Xavier merchandise I bought a Tyreek Jones a running man jersey, and
Yeah.
I still have it somewhere.
Yeah.
It's in rough shape now, but I still have it somewhere. I love Tyreek Jones. I mean, the way that he rebounded and just his tenacity on both sides of the ball, I love Tyreek Jones.
Yep.
Cool. Well, Paul, thank you as always for coming on. All right, I guess our last thing. Do you have any questions for us?
Ooh, fellas, do you think we're going to get in the NCAA tournament?
Yes.
Yes, yeah. I'm as like I said earlier, but as Buckeyes, obviously there's a chance we might play Ohio State in Dayton. Kind of. I mean, I don't know if that's high odds, but it's kind of shaping up that could be a potential thing, which would be a lot of fun. But yeah, I do think we will. I think we can go and get a dominating win in Hinkle tomorrow, and then close the season out for senior night on Saturday against Providence, and I think we look pretty good from there.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we're obviously going to go 2-0 this week, and then you stack up. The SEC is going to continue to beat each other up. We hope. You can only bubble watch for so long, though. I think 2-0. I think we're in anyways.
Yep.
So, anything else?
Nothing else, fellas. Let's go watch some bubble teams play right now.
Yeah, thanks for coming on.
Yes,
We
sir.
really appreciate it.
Yep, absolutely. Thanks for having me, fellas.
Sir, thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.